Hello, my loves. It's Mrs. Villa again. I hope you're all having a great day. I'm going to read to you today one of my favorite stories from when I was a child. And I do not own the rights to this story. I'm just reading it for educational purposes. The title is The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and the author is Beatrix Potter. So let's take a look at this cover. And using just the information that the illustrator gave us in the cover, let's start thinking about what the genre could be. Could it be realistic fiction? Animal fantasy? Is it a nonfiction story? You'll be able to tell as we read, but just something to think about, okay? All right, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And this is a super special copy of this book because Rosemary's godmother got this for her and she signed it. Her godmother and her Uncle Jason. Old book. Okay, here we go. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sand bank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor." Ooh. She's warning them. She's saying, don't go over there by Mr. McGregor because your dad hopped over there and got turned into a pie. "Now, run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. Ooh, I love blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. Is he listening to his mother's warning? And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Remember, a thief is someone that takes something that doesn't belong to them, so that's why he's calling him a thief. Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Oh, I like how the author gives us so many adjectives. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons. It was quite new. Really helps us to visualize, right? Because we can see a little picture there. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. You guys know what it is when somebody sobs? Like, we know to cry, right? Like, but when you sob, you cry so hard where it's like almost your body shaking. So that's what he was doing, guys. He shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard. Someone heard him by sparrows. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Ooh. And pushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath the flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed, "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. And tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. Now, when they say he upset 3 plants, does it mean he made the plants mad? No. It means like he knocked them over, right? Okay. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. And he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. And there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He doesn't want to mess with cats, does he? He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scratch. So the hoe is the tool that Mr. McGregor was using to dig into the dirt when he was planting his lettuce and cabbages before. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Ooh, did you guys think he was going to make it? Ooh, he's lucky. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. So remember, whose jacket was that? We talked about how the author used such great adjectives to talk about the blue jacket with the brass buttons. And now look what Mr. McGregor's using it for. To frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice, soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what had he done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. And they don't mean Fortnite, guys, like a video game. They're talking about how he's lost a jacket and shoes before. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea and gave a dose of it to Peter. One tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. Ooh, why couldn't Peter have had all that? That sounds really yummy, but Peter couldn't have that. Why? Yeah, because he wasn't feeling well. Let's think about this too. Did you notice that when he was in the garden, who was he with? Was he with Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail? No. He was all by himself and he wasn't listening. Then I just love how at the end the illustrations just go around and show different scenes that you'll see from the other series, because Beatrix Potter has a whole series of these books, guys. So I'll be reading them again to you soon. But I want you to think about the lesson in this story too. Do you think that Peter would have lost his jacket and his shoes and all that, gotten into all that trouble if he would have listened to his mother? So, moral of the story, the lesson, always listen to mom or dad, of course. Okay. All right, my loves, thank you for listening. I will be back again with another story soon, and I love you more than coffee. And we're